Hello and welcome to Visiting Dugouts, a Fans First Sports Network production. I am Crystal O'Keefe, and today I have Josh Hill back on to chat about the Twins. You might remember him from last year. So, hey, reintroduce yourself for those that might have forgot or not know you.
Yeah, I'm Josh Hill. I run Puckett's Pond over at Fansided. It's actually my second year of doing Puckett's Pond. So 2 for 2 coming on here. I'm liking this tradition, the annual tradition. So
Oh, we love it. We love a good tradition and being podcast partners.
and not a rivalry like the White Sox and the Twins. It's more, partnership. So
Yeah,
it's not like, Cleveland. We all have a mutual hatred of Cleveland. So
we didn't want to deal with them. Oh, now, I did have a lovely guest on for Cleveland, but we don't want to deal with them. Okay, so what's new with the Twins?
Well, it seems like last year I came on and we were talking about Byron Buxton being hurt and how much of a bummer that was because he's got such high potential. And now, new year, different injury, but it's Royce Lewis who's out, which is a total bummer. Like the second time he's on the IL this year so far. Like that's coloring all of the success that the Twins have had this season, the streakiest team in baseball, who it seems they're capable of winning 12 games in a row, and then they're almost a lock to lose the next 5. It's just a roller coaster of constant ebbs and flows. But the Royce Lewis injuries sort of have been the common thread throughout the season, which is really unfortunate because we've seen how good he is when he plays. Like there's such these small sample sizes, and it's eerily reminiscent of the Buxton stuff because Buxton, he's an all-star MVP candidate when he's healthy, and we're thankfully he's been healthy almost this entire season. Like he's had a couple of flare-ups, but nothing that's really knocked him out like it has in the past. But that injury baton seems to have been passed to Royce Lewis, who again, all-star MVP candidate when he's healthy, but he can't stay off the IL. And it seems to be the same injury. So like it was the right quad strain on opening day, which was the biggest tease in the world because he hits a home run in his first at bat. And then 2 innings later, it's like, well, we'll see you in 2 months when you're healthy again. But again, it's the right side of his leg that's been giving him problems, and it's not the first, second, or even third time that he's been dealing with stuff on that side of his body. So that's a little bit concerning. But that's more gloom and doom though, because I mean the Twins they're doing all right. It's just that kind of hum of anxiety is in the background of everything.
It seems like this adductor strain is the new hamstring because like 2 seasons ago it was every single person pulling their hamstring running to first base. This year it's every single person straining that running to first base because Luis Robert Jr., I think that's what he was at. I mean, 3 White Sox players went down at the same time, and it was all of the 3 big franchise names, and they were all really similar injuries to what Royce Lewis just went down with. So I don't know what's going on during these trainings and if people are actually stretching and doing what they're supposed to do. But it's weird how common these injuries get year after year.
Yeah. And the problem with Royce Lewis is he is such a gamer that he wants to come back when he's not necessarily ready. And that's sort of now kind of bumping up against what the Twins want. And there's almost a little bit of tension growing because after he got hurt and had to leave that game the other day, he was like, oh, he kind of had some negative comments where he's like, it's out of my control, it's all this kind of stuff, almost kind of complaining about needing to go on the IL, which is admirable because you want your superstar to be healthy and want to be healthy. But then when he's in his rehab assignment at St. Paul and they're like, just ease yourself back in, and he goes rogue and steals 2 bases, it's like, don't do that. It's a rock and a hard place because you're like, I love it and I love the fire, but I also hate not seeing you in the lineup. And this is how you do that. And now all of a sudden he's injured again, which, I don't know if that has anything to do with him maybe rushing himself back a little bit too soon. But already he's like, I could play tomorrow if they need me to. I was like, but that's the lack of awareness of being able to stay healthy it's kind of a problem. But again, it's admirable. So it's tough to hate it, but it's like, no, we need you in October, not now.
I just had this conversation with my son who had injured his foot. He had a big bruise on his foot, and I don't know exactly what he did to it. He was able to at least walk on it after a day or 2, but this was just days before his championship game was happening. that was supposed to already have happened, but that there was some rain issues that went on, so we couldn't play then. But he hurts his foot, and I'm like, you need to stay off of it, and you need to ice it, and we need to see if you're going to be able to play next week, because this was over the weekend. And he was just like, oh, I'll be fine, I'll be fine. And then it was, oh, I don't think I'm ever going to be able to play again. I'm like, okay, this is dramatic. And then he was feeling better come like Sunday, and the game was Monday. And my cousin was doing this like kickball tournament with his friends. And so my son's like, oh, Scott's playing kickball today. Can you drop me off? And I'm like, no, no, you have a game tomorrow where it actually, there's going to be kickball all summer long. We are only going to have this one shot at winning this championship game. This is your window. So if you go out there and you hurt your foot and you can't play baseball, I'm not going to be very happy with you. And he was like, oh, okay, fine. And he's like texting my cousin all angrily. And I was like, look, I spend way more money on baseball than I do like a pop-up kickball game on a Sunday afternoon. So, oh, admirable, but oh my gosh, just sit down and ice it for a little bit.
Right? We'll get you to talk to Royce Lewis. That's what needs to happen.
Apparently. So how is his injury going to affect the team right now?
Well, it's actually a little bit of a blessing in disguise, because when he got injured the first time back in March, late March, early April, the Twins called up Austin Martin to make his MLB debut, which was good because Austin Martin seemed like he was on track all spring training to maybe make the final roster as Buxton's insurance policy. And then they traded for Manuel Margot, and that kind of ended that. But this time around, Royce Lewis hitting the IL meant that Brooks Lee finally got called up. So we got to see Brooks Lee make his debut. Long awaited, but it's hard to say it's long awaited when he was only drafted like 2 years ago. Like his rise through the farm system has been absolutely insane, almost unprecedented for a superstar Twins prospect. Because usually, we talked about Buxton, we talked about Lewis. He's kind of on that track of he's going to be the guy. Like he's somebody who we're really looking forward to. And he's already in the majors. And we had to wait a while for Buxton to get called up. Lewis, injuries kind of, again, held him back, but his trajectory was a little bit longer. So to have Brooks Lee up, that was super exciting. It sort of took a little bit of the sting off, because he's been, he went, 2 for 4 in his debut. He's been pretty decent, back-to-back games with an RBI. So there's something there. And he's just been absolutely mashing at AAA. So this was long overdue, it seems, which is crazy to think. Like I said, this guy's not been in the farm system that long, but he's already, 2022, he was the 8th overall pick. 2023, he reaches AAA. I think it was like late August, early September, he's finally up. And now here we are in July 2024, and he's already on the MLB roster. And I'm sort of equating this to what happened with Edouard Julien last year. So Julien gets called up, not on the opening day roster, but Max Kepler goes down. With him on the IL, the Twins are able to call up Julien, and then Julien just seamlessly fits into the lineup for the rest of the season. And he's had his struggles this year. He's back down at AAA trying to figure out his swing, but he's a big piece of the future. But the Lee promotion feels kind of like that, whereas he's up, he's proving himself. And then when Royce Lewis comes back off the IL, which, again, who knows when that's going to be? They're saying maybe after the All-Star break. I would say pump the brakes. Maybe August or September is when he comes back. But when he does, you've got Brooks Lee theoretically playing very, very well. And now you've got a really good problem where it's like, how do you fit all of these pieces onto the roster? So that's sort of been taking a little bit of the sting off of another Royce Lewis injury. You get to see Brooks Lee, and it's like, all right, here we go. Number 2 prospect in the farm system's up, and another youth movement's sweeping Minnesota, which worked out pretty well last year.
Yeah, clearly. So you guys are sitting second in the AL Central. You are, at the time of this recording, 6 games back from the Guardians, who have just been on a tear, unfortunately. I mean, is there a way to kind of, at some point, pass them, especially if you've got these young superstars that are performing very well? Is there a way to either get way closer or even surpass them during this? We still have so many months left in the season. Is there a bright future ahead? There we go, for the Twins right now.
I think so. I think when the Twins and the Guardians meet again, it's not going to be the same Twins team that the Guardians have seen a couple of times this season, both in terms of who's on the roster, but also I think things are starting to click offensively for the Twins that we didn't see earlier in the season. So they had that first series back at the beginning of April, and it was just a total disaster. But the Twins weren't playing well at all. Like they were off to a 7-13 start. Like they just weren't hitting. A lot of the offensive problems were reminiscent of what we saw around this time last year, where the offense just absolutely cratered. Carlos Correa was slumping. Buxton was hurt. Nothing was going right. The pitching was really the thing that was keeping them alive. And it seems like that's flipped around now. The offense is really starting to click. Correa has been, you want to talk about being on a tear. Correa, ever since, he got voted, the third most overrated player in baseball. And then Lavelli Neal, one of the Twins beat writers, is saying he's, not earning his money. All of a sudden, he's just, like he said last year, it's fuel in his Ferrari. He's just on an absolute tear, which is great because we're seeing what his impact on that offense is. When he's clicking, it's a trickle effect where then everybody's starting to hit, or it starts working a little bit better with everybody else in the lineup. Ryan Jeffers is capable of some offensive explosions. Trevor Larnach has come back. I kind of wrote him off over the offseason. I thought Matt Wallner had really secured that outfield spot. But now, again, to a lesser degree of Royce Lewis and Brooks Lee, Matt Wallner's doing really well at AAA. So now you're going to have, Wallner and Larnach. So you've got a nice little outfield situation there. But the point is that the offense is starting to click a lot better than it was the first couple times that the Twins saw the Guardians. It's the pitching, I think, that the Twins need to figure out a little bit. Starting rotation, Pablo Lopez was having a rough start to the season. Now it seems like he's starting to even out a little bit. Joe Ryan has sort of stepped up as the ace of the staff, which, again, good problem to have when you've got, Pablo Lopez is finally going to start getting back to the level we know he can pitch at. You've got him and Joe Ryan. Bailey Ober's sort of starting to figure things out. And then with the youth movement, you've got Simeon Woods Richardson, who's really starting to establish himself in an important role in the rotation. But it's the bullpen, which was coming into the season the strongest part of the roster. That's where I think they're going to need to make some improvements. And I don't know if they're going to make something at the trade deadline where you're adding somebody. You've got the Twins love to say that they've got more value in the farm system than they do on the trade market, which is kind of a cop-out to get out of trading. But we'll see what happens because you got Griffin Jax has been really, really great this season. Then Yohan Duran is what he is. Like he's, it's a white-knuckled ride every time he comes out to the mound, but usually it ends pretty well. But outside of those guys, you don't have a lot of depth or a lot of confidence in the bullpen, which is unfortunate because that was the strongest unit coming into the season, and now it might be something that hampers them a little bit. And that's definitely something, not only trying to catch Cleveland, but if you make it into the postseason, you don't have a good bullpen. It's like you're basically going to get a participation trophy because you're going to be out. And Twins fans know almost better than anybody what it feels like to get to October and then just Abe Simpson right out of the room.
Yeah.
So that bullpen can't hold us back. Needs to get improved a little bit.
That's one thing that White Sox fans, I think, really are struggling with right now because our bullpen, I mean, we already didn't have a lot of pitchers going in to this season, and now the bullpen is very hit or miss. And a lot of times these games get really, really close. And then you throw in your bullpen and you're like, oh, great, John Bribia is going to give up 3 runs. Or, oh, great, Michael Kopech is in a very high stress situation. So he's going to give up the walk-off run. Like, it's just one of those things where you used to have faith in these guys, but now your faith has just dwindled so much.
Yep.
So, I mean, with their bullpen, the next question is going to be like, is there any specific spot that you need to cover for this trade deadline, or just anyone in general that you're kind of crossing your fingers for?
It's more or less just trying to find some low risk bullpen help because the Twins, they're not going to go and make any big splashy blockbuster trade. I think that what happened a couple of years ago where they go out and they did address the bullpen. They got Jorge Lopez, traded some good prospects for him. The Tyler Mahle trade is the same window, that same deadline. And I think the Twins are still trying to pick up the pieces from how that one blew up in their face, where Lopez, before a calendar year, was already off the team. And then Mahle's, he had his, elbow problem. He's got Tommy John, and now he's down in Texas. And that never really panned out either. But they gave up a lot of really good prospects to make those 2 trades happen. And that was reflected last year where they didn't make any trades because I think they were still feeling the sting of that. And they also really value the farm system. They don't want to give up these prospects. the thing is, you don't have a ton of prospects to call up to help out in the bullpen. Like Louis Varland is somebody who I think is going to maybe be back at some point. He's tried doing the starting thing again. Didn't really work out. He might get another spot start at some point, but I think the last spot start that he had was maybe a good place to end his journey of being a starter, at least for now, especially because we saw last year he came back up. He struggled in the rotation last season, came back up in late in the year and was a valuable piece of the bullpen. He's somebody that maybe you can call up. Josh Winters got called up because they sent down David Festa. He's going to get a starting role, I think, maybe as well. Chris Paddock comes off of the IL, but he's another guy that you can slot into the bullpen. But it's going to be like that. Brock Stewart just got transferred to the 60-day IL, which is a problem because he's the guy that last year they're like, we don't need to trade for anybody because Brock Stewart's coming back, and then he didn't come back. So I think it's going to be, if the Twins make a trade, it's going to be in the bullpen, and it's going to be a low risk gamble. They're not going to go out and they're not going to be buying any of the top relievers on the market. I don't even think they're going to be in the mid tier. They're going to be looking for somebody they can pick up on the cheap who's going to help out. Steven Okert's a good example of that. Like they traded Nick Gordon. It was basically they flipped Nick Gordon down to Miami for Okert because they were both out of options. And I think that's the type of deal that the Twins are probably going to look for if they make a trade at all. It's going to be something very low key, going to fly under the radar. But sometimes those are the ones that end up paying off in October where you're like, I can't believe they got this guy for so little. But I think the Twins, they're not going to make any big, huge, splashy trade. They've been scared off of that. And, you're talking about the youth movement and how well it worked last year with those guys coming up. And so far this year, you've gotten some nice boost from those young guys. I don't know how deep you want to dip into the farm system and trade off some of those prospects. Again, unless you do go big and you're like, this guy makes the difference of us winning a World Series, then you could maybe see the Twins doing something. But I don't think there's a guy out there that intrigues them that way. And I also think just the way that they have, PTSD from what happened a couple of years ago at the deadline, they're going to try to be a little bit more subtle than going out and making a splashy trade. Or worst case scenario, and perhaps the most likely scenario, they just cross their fingers and they're like, we're hoping for the best. Guys are going to get healthy and then we're going to be fine. And, the same thing they said last year at the deadline, whoever's coming back off the IL is going to be better than anybody that we could trade for. It's like, that's an answer no fan wants to hear, but we'll see what happens with that.
We hear that a lot of like, oh, well, we've got this at home. It's kind of the whole, we've got McDonald's, or we've got, McDonald's at home, and the McDonald's is John Brebbia. So, we are very familiar with that one as well. So I was looking up just some of your players ahead of the All-Star game of who could possibly make it. And I stumbled across a really great article someone wrote about like 5 potential players. So they've listed Carlos Correa, the ever so dreamy Joe Ryan, Griffin Jax, Willie Castro, and Jose Miranda as like 5 potential All-Stars. So and again, maybe say you can only throw in 2 of them. Who do you think is going to make it on this Twins team?
I would say Correa definitely deserves a spot. That would be very validating for him, for Twins fans who sort of stuck by him, especially like we were saying, he got dragged over the coals, like almost out of nowhere. It was like it's like, what? Carlos Correa's getting dragged for, it didn't make any sense. And then he instantly proved everybody wrong. So much, he dunked on everybody so hard that he won a weekly award. Like that was amazing. That was so satisfying. So I'd say him going to the All-Star game, it would be very validating for fans. It would be validating for Correa. It would be validating for the organization because, they invested the $200 million in him, and it was that big talking point with his production. Now he's awesome. It's that second spot where it's like you're kind of choosing your favorite kid almost. It's like, I don't know, because Jose Miranda, he was somebody who was also sort of written off this offseason where he had a really rough season last year. He slumped offensively. He got hurt. And that sort of went with the rise of Royce Lewis, and he lost his starting job at third base. And now he's earned a very valuable spot in the lineup back to where you can't send him back down. You need Royce Lewis or Jose Miranda's bat in the lineup. So that sort of deserves to be rewarded, I think. Willie Castro, he's like a classic Twins piranha from like the mid 2000s, where he's just a dude. He's just doing everything he needs to do. He's not super flashy about it, but he plays all over the field. it's just like a classic Twins template. Like, you name a bunch of guys from that era, and it's like Willie Castro fits the mold. And I think that those guys would get rewarded randomly with, all-star trips. I think Willie Castro, you could definitely make the case for him going there. Joe Ryan, I think, would be my pick, though. If you have to send two guys from the Twins to Texas for the All-Star game, I think Carlos Correa, that speaks for itself. And then Joe Ryan, it's almost like a coronation. It's like, okay, last year it was Pablo Lopez and Sonny Gray. They were leading the rotation. And then you had Joe Ryan, who was sort of bubbling under the surface. It's like, this guy's going to be a really important piece of the rotation moving forward, but he sort of struggled. He still struggles with giving up home runs, but he's definitely taken a lot of steps forward, and he's made a lot of improvements. And he's a fan favorite. Everybody loves him. It's impossible not to like Joe Ryan. He's great when he's on the mound, and then just the general vibe that he has with the team. It's just this awesome, like, laid back California Grateful Dead fan. Like, the dude's just it's a great vibe, and I think that speaks to the success that the team has had this year. Where we've had Twins teams in the past where, like, this is a competitive team, seems like they can be good. And then teams that have hit struggles, and you don't have that sort of clubhouse, mentality where you can kind of dig yourself out of it. You latch on to guys like Joe Ryan at times where it's tough and there's struggles. And Willie Castro has the same thing. Like, Nick Gordon didn't play in the postseason last year, but he was basically like the mascot in the dugout, and fans just like attached themselves to him.
Yeah.
And it was hard not to. And you need to have those vibes in the clubhouse, because that's what makes teams special. And that's what helps you get through the long summer of, okay, we're only 6 games behind Cleveland. There's a lot of games left. Let's not panic or freak out if you lose a couple in a row. That's why the streakiest team in baseball has sort of been able to not lose focus or lose sight of the goal. It's because you got guys like Joe Ryan in the clubhouse who's just like, all right, on a bad day, we can still have fun. We still have these guys that we can rally around, and then rewarding what he's actually doing on the field. I think that would mean a lot to sort of where he fits into the future. It's like, you've got this all-star pitcher, not unlike how, Pablo Lopez last year snuck into the all-star game. And then you've got, Sonny Gray and Pablo Lopez both there. It's like, okay, that would be a nice little star for Joe Ryan to wear.
Yeah, for sure. It's hard. You said it best. It's hard not to love him. I love him. I think he's wonderful. He reminds me so much of the actor who plays Billy on Stranger Things.
Yes.
Yes. He looks so much like him, and Billy was clearly the hottest person on Stranger Things. So
he's also got I get a lot of Tim Lincecum vibes from him too. I loved Tim Lincecum. And it's like the Billy from Stranger Things and Tim Lincecum, they come together, and Joe Ryan is the answer to that equation. And it's like, that's perfect. There's no better two people to have. And then you get Joe Ryan. It's like, this is great.
Tim Lincecum is at least my all-time favorite pitcher. It's him and Andrew McCutchen that just barely sit at the top, super comfy, as my all-time favorites. And when I went to Oracle Park, I was sitting there like, where is the Tim Lincecum statue? Why is there not one here? And like, there wasn't anything in the stores. I was like, oh, I'll get like a Lincecum shirt. Nothing. And I was like, why are you not celebrating the greatest pitcher of all time in your shop? Where is it?
Tim Lincecum erasure. We don't need this.
I was so mad. I was like, where is it? Like, I didn't come all the way here to not see a single thing with the best pitcher ever. Disrespect. So much disrespect. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's just how I feel about my guy. So we will take a quick break and talk about some more pitching when we come back. Okay, welcome back. Let's get into the series with the Twins. First things first, some kind of pitching matchup. It was too early when I checked earlier today to see if there were some probable pitchers yet, but who do you think the White Sox might be facing this series?
Well, it depends, because we've got Chris Paddock's on the IL still, because they kind of shut him down to give him a little bit of rest with Winder's back up. But I think if we're talking about pitchers that the White Sox don't want to face. There's Joe Ryan, who we just talked about.
Yeah.
But Simeon Woods Richardson is a guy that I think he might slot into getting one of those starts in Chicago. He's a guy who he's pitched pretty well against the AL Central, which is good. That's what you want out of him. But I always look at some of these starts against some of the, not to disparage the White Sox, but it's like my brother recently married into a White Sox family. So it's like I was at the wedding and I heard all about, Ken, his father-in-law is telling me all about the White Sox, and he's wearing his White Sox, button-up shirts and stuff. And it's just endless, they should be so much better than they are, but I can't believe I have to watch this team do what they're doing. And, the greatest rivalry in baseball is Eloy Jimenez against his hamstring. So it's like all of this stuff, and it's tough. But when I look at teams like the White Sox, where it's like the Twins should beat these teams that aren't very good. Like they did that with the A's. So far this season, they've done that with the White Sox. Those are games where they're almost tune-ups for guys like Simeon Woods Richardson, who you need him to keep developing into that very important middle of the rotation role, especially because if we're thinking long-term here and you get into October, you've got Pablo and you've got Joe Ryan at the top of the rotation, and then you got Bailey Ober. Getting into a deep series, you want to have a guy like Simeon Woods Richardson out there with confidence. And I think these are the types of starts, against Chicago, against Oakland. Those are games where it's like he can start building up some of that confidence so that when he does go into tougher games against Cleveland or against New York or some of these, Seattle, he's able to build off of what he's, sort of developed in these tune-up games. And we've seen that he's pitched well against Seattle, who's a surprisingly very good team this year.
Yeah.
He struggled against some of these other teams, but the Twins have struggled in general against some of the top-heavy teams in baseball. It's Simeon Woods Richardson's a guy that I would be very excited to see pitch against Chicago, just because he's going to get those tune-ups. He's going to get that development. And the same could be said for, a guy like Chris Paddock, who might be back by then. I'm not 100% sure. But he's a guy who the Twins invested a lot of faith in as far as replacing Sonny Gray, which was the big off-season need that they needed to do. How do you replace Sonny Gray's production? And you're not going to get a one-to-one. You're not going to get a Cy Young candidate to replace him. It was more or less, how can you fill those innings that Sonny Gray was pitching last year? And Paddock's a guy that they looked at to be like, this is, again, classic Twins. We don't need to trade or sign anybody because we've got Chris Paddock, who's going to come back, and he's going to be a guy who can help out. And it's been so-so returns so far. But again, a lot like Woods Richardson, getting these starts against teams like the White Sox, they're very important for getting back some of that confidence, not only for the pitchers, but also for the fans, because you can see, okay, this guy, you see him out there in the playoffs, you can have that confidence of, I think this is going to go well. It's important on multiple different levels. So I think, Woods Richardson and Paddock, if he's off the IL and he's back, those are two guys that I would say I'd keep an eye on as far as maybe getting some good starts against the White Sox, or at least much needed tune-up starts against the White Sox.
Yeah, we seem to be the team that you can feel confident against. And I was just looking at Woods Richardson. I was looking at his ERA. I mean, it's pretty respectable for a young guy. Hasn't been in too many games. So yeah, he looks pretty good, actually. Good for him.
Yeah, and it was a tough road for him too, because it was like the third time as the charm, because he came up the last couple of years, and I think he only had one appearance in each season, and it was not great. Like, I think he got lit up by the Nationals a couple of years ago. Last year it wasn't too great. Or maybe that was last year they got lit up by the Nationals. It was the Tigers the year before. And then this year he comes up for a spot start for a doubleheader, and he's still in the rotation, which is great. And that's, we talked about with Brooks Lee and Edouard Julien last year. It's really nice when you get those guys who come up and it's like, you don't have a lot of expectations as far as like, oh, this is a huge call-up. Although Brooks Lee was a huge call-up, but like long-term, it's like, okay, this guy's still here. So it's been really satisfying on just a personal level, on a human level, to see Woods Richardson really find some footing finally after a couple of so-so starts. And then he was a little rocky at AAA. To have him really settle in, it's been good for a baseball perspective, but also, one of the best things about Twins Twitter is they're just so attached to the human element of the team. And that's been a really, really cool part of the season, is everybody rallying around Woods Richardson. And same thing with Kyle Farmer, who's been struggling for almost the entire season, and he's got the weight of the $6 million arbitration settlement that he had over the offseason, not at all living up to what the Twins need him to do. Most of Twins Twitter, you will not find a bad word said about Kyle Farmer. And I think that that's also something. We could talk about Joe Ryan and the clubhouse vibes. I think that's been a really cool part of this season too, of just Twins Twitter being tapping into the human element side of things. So when you see Woods Richardson have these great starts, it's deeper than that. It's deeper than, oh, he's got some really good numbers. It's this guy's finally over the hill and everybody's behind him. And it's just been really an awesome unseen element of the success.
I have noticed Twins Twitter has been pretty chill this year. I have a ton of Twins mutuals, and they're not infighting and depressed every single game, like my little corner of the internet. So jealous. So obviously you have a ton of threats to the White Sox on this team. We just mentioned 5 guys that would easily make an all-star team. So who do you think, heading into this series is going to be the biggest threat for this White Sox team?
I don't know. It's almost been like a collective effort for the Twins. It's easy to say like Carlos Correa can be like the biggest threat. I'll go back to Ryan Jeffers, who's sort of been a little up and down this year, and he's also quietly like the catcher of the future, it seems. Like, I don't really know how the Twins are going to approach his role moving forward, but like when they started the season, it was like Christian Vasquez and Ryan Jeffers were going to kind of split duties behind the plate. And they, for the most part, have split duties. But Jeffers, much like at the end of last season, has distanced himself from Vasquez. And that's a guy who kind of lays in the weeds a little bit. And he's not an obvious threat where you're like, you're coming into a series, you're like Buxton, Carlos Correa, yikes. Really not. Thankfully for the White Sox, you don't have to face Royce Lewis, but Royce Lewis is in that category of like, oh man, this guy's coming up to bat. I'd say Ryan Jeffers isn't somebody who's obviously a threat, but he's somebody who's also capable of, if the Twins are in a situation in late innings and they need a boost, sometimes he's the guy who comes up to the plate and it's like, all right, he gets a nice clutch RBI, or he gets the bases, gets things moving on the bases, or comes up with a home run. He's pretty sneaky with coming through for the Twins. So I'd say he's somebody who's I would watch as a little bit of a threat. Low key threat, not an obvious threat, but that's also the joy of this Twins roster. They've got guys like that, because Larnach's the same way. And then Willie Castro, who we talked about as a potential all-star candidate. He's a guy who's capable of, crushing somebody. And then, Max Kepler, Germany's finest baseball export. Germany's only baseball export, I think. He's also, he's capable of mashing too. So they're dangerous outside of the top-heavy guys.
It's good to have really sneaky, good people like Jeffers, because, again, you could go in there and not think that you need a scouting report on this kid, and then, bam, it's like a grand slam, which is fun to watch, not necessarily when you're on the receiving end of that grand slam, but fun to watch. Anyway. So then going back to that, what are the keys for the Twins to take this series?
It's something that's been really impressive about this team, that they need to keep developing, or at least keep working on how to harness this energy. Is last year they would get down in games and then it would just be like they fold like a poker table. It's like, all right, they'd be losing these 1-0 games, they'd be losing these very low scoring games, and the offense just wasn't coming alive. Or they'd lose a lead halfway through a game and they wouldn't be able to find a way to dig themselves out of a hole. And we've seen a complete different side of the Twins so far this season, especially after things started clicking offensively, where they'll get down or they'll have a rough start and they'll be able to come back and find a way to win these games. And now Detroit's not necessarily a great team, but we saw them do that the other day, where it's like, okay, they get beat up a little bit in the first couple of innings, they're down, but this team never feels like they're out. Where last year you could definitely, it's like when in the Simpsons, when he breaks his heart. It's like you can see the exact moment he broke his heart. You could see the exact moment where the Twins were like, done, they're out, they're going to lose this game. And that just isn't around this team this year. It seems like in those late innings, they have no quit. They're trying to get back into the games. And then you talk about guys like Jeffers or Castro or Larnach or some of the, even Carlos Santana, who's starting to come around a little bit. These guys who it's like, those are the guys who in the late innings, they're able to do something that helps the Twins get going. And that was lacking last year. And I think against the White Sox, that's one of the keys because, you know, they have to face Fedde or some of these guys. The White Sox have some decent starting pitching who may or may not still be with the team when the Twins play them. We'll see if trades happen. But, you know, they're going to face games like against Chicago where they're going to get down, even though it seems like, how is this possible? This is not a good team. How are we down against this team? Not having that quit, being able to claw out of that hole late in games, I think is something that Twins need to keep developing. That energy needs to be harnessed because that's huge in October. Like that is something that we haven't seen out of this team at big moments. So being able to go in there and look, hey, White Sox, there's some decent starting pitchers there. The game might not get out to the start that you want it to get out to, but not giving up and being able to tap into that sort of energy. And I think also a key to success for the White Sox might be that the aforementioned bullpen that we talked about. That's something where you talk about losing some of these leads in the late innings. The offense waking up has been a missing element, but the bullpen has been almost an Achilles heel. So finding a way, much like with Woods, Richardson, and Paddock, where it's like almost tune-up games, using these games against teams that you should be beating to basically pop the hood and figure out, you know, how to make the machine run a little bit better, how to make that engine, you know, a little bit smoother. So that's another one where it's like that bullpen, you've got to figure something out there. And that could be a way where the White Sox actually win a game in this season series here, which inevitably is probably going to happen. But
so can I chalk that down as the same fears you have? It's just the bullpen completely blowing it? Or do you have other fears about it?
It's just the bullpen completely blowing it. It's, you know, White Sox, we've seen, you know, in series this year, they're able to sort of surge a little bit. Or you get, you know, the great call from the other week, what was it, the La Pantera, like, let's go. Like, you're going to get those kind of moments. And the Twins bullpen is capable of providing those moments for the White Sox. It's going to be frustrating. But again, that's where the offense comes in, where that was lacking last season, where you have those moments where it's like, man, the bullpen just let us down. But you know that the offense is probably going to make up the difference, which again, Detroit, not a great team. But the other day, the offense absolutely flips that game when things got a little bit shaky. That's sort of what you're looking at with the Twins. How can that offense help out the bullpen? But the bullpen's it's a tough ride to be on, watching them come out there.
Yeah, I mean, and the same could be said about the White Sox completely blowing it, you know, in later innings. Because, oh man, it's been tough to watch, especially, and I feel probably the worst for Erick Fedde because he has been so dominant. But he'll go out there and pitch a gem, and then suddenly it's 9-3 in the 8th inning, and the White Sox are, you know, not the ones with 9 runs. And you're like, can you please just give this man a win? Like, he deserves it more than just about anyone on this team right now. I feel so bad for him. I hope he finds a place wonderful where they treat him right and he can win so many games. He deserves it.
It does have like Sonny Gray vibes from last year, because Sonny Gray would do the same thing where he's pitched. I mean, he's a Cy Young runner-up. Like, he's one of the best pitchers in baseball, but that offense just wasn't able to help him out. And then the bullpen, that was less about the bullpen not coming through for Sonny Gray. So in that scenario, it'd be like the Twins offense is the White Sox bullpen to Erick Fedde, where it's the offense just wasn't able to generate enough run support. So he'd be losing these, you know, very tight games. And it's like, well, you know, the home run he gives up in the first inning ends up being the difference. And it's like, that should never happen when you have a guy like Sonny Gray out on the mound having the season that he had. So I deeply sympathize with the Erick Fedde love, because it's like, man, this guy, he's throwing like a career high strikeouts that he had, you know, the other month. And it's like, you just have no faith that the White Sox are going to win that game. It's like, it's like tears in the rain. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, it's great here, but nice performance, but it's just another loss. It's tough.
Sorry, you don't get anything from this. And he's had such an interesting career because he did just come back from Korea, and now he's kind of got this good second chance, but unfortunately he just landed on the White Sox. So it's almost
He was a guy too I thought that the Twins
wandering.
might pursue over the winter.
Mm-hmm.
But again, the Twins decided to not spend any money and slash $30 million out of the payroll. So as you do when you have the deepest postseason run you've ever had since 2002, what a way to generate some buzz with the fan base.
It's just how it goes. So moving away from our respective teams before we sign off, what are your thoughts just going into this season in general? Do you have any hot takes or just fun opinions or anything like that?
We kind of touched on the Mariners. We were
Mm-hmm.
talking about surprising teams. I always like the Mariners. It seems like they're the Los Angeles Chargers of baseball, where it's like every year they might have a team that's like, hey, they could be good, and then it's just they kind of fumble the bag, and it's already starting to happen because I was talking with some people about this the other day, where we're like the shark in Jaws is the Houston Astros, where it's like unseen, you think it's gone, and then it's just coming back because now they're above 500, and we all know what's going to happen now. We all buried the Astros. We all made fun of them, and the poor Seattle Mariners are the only thing standing in the way of them not winning the West. And you just know the Astros, they're going to click over the summer. They're going to make the postseason, and they're going to end up in the ALCS beating the Yankees. We've seen this story how many times before.
Oh, yeah.
But that also sort of leads into the other hot take that I had, which is, and as a Twins fan, it's almost sacrilegious to say this, but I think baseball, in general, as like everybody sort of paying attention to baseball, is better when the Yankees are good. And the Yankees being good this year, there's just something about, like, I don't like the Yankees, and I definitely don't want them to win, but there is something about, okay, they're good. You got day games at Yankee Stadium like yesterday. You're like, thankfully they lost to the Reds. Thank you, Cincinnati. But there's something about baseball where it's like, it's the same thing like basketball. Like basketball's better at a national level when the Knicks are good, when the Bulls are good. They're not necessarily underdogs, but it's like these big national brands. So I think baseball, I don't mind that the Yankees are good this year because it seems like baseball is just a little bit better and more interesting when you've got that gateway for everybody to sort of get interested in it. And the flip side of that is the Dodgers, where it's like West Coast, nobody's up that late to watch the Dodgers. They've got this super team that nobody wants to win, and then they're doing really great, which is annoying. So it's almost like coastally flipped. It's like the Dodgers are the new Yankees, where we're like, I wish nothing but terrible things for the Dodgers because they won their little bubble World Series, and that's nice. They can go play with the championship, but like, just go away. We want other things. And it's maybe to the point where it's warped my brain so much that I'm like, the Yankees are good. This is awesome for baseball because at least it's not the Dodgers.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not as afraid of the Yankees as I would be the Dodgers, I guess, which is weird to say because they are great this year. I mean, clearly they've got tons of superstars. They've got Juan Soto, which who didn't really want him in the offseason? And then when you've got Aaron Judge really heating up and Juan Soto heating up, and now you have Garrett Cole back, and you already had fantastic pitching while he was gone. I mean, it's bad when, and I think I said this last time, it's bad when Nestor Cortez is your fifth starter because he is still very good on paper. And Carlos Rodon made this really great comeback. He's been excellent this year. So they already had this pitching. They didn't need their ace to even come back. And they don't need more offensive power, but for some reason they're just clicking on all cylinders this season, which, I mean, it is. They're, as much as I hate to admit it, they are kind of like that America's team. Like, they're like the Dallas Cowboys, where everybody, loves the Dallas Cowboys. It's America's team. And the Yankees are very much like that because I feel like they're kind of the gateway to baseball. They're like that gateway drug that gets you in because you see somebody wearing a Yankees hat and you're like, oh, I'm going to get a Yankees hat and look cool. So, yeah, I that's not that bad. That's not too much of a hot take. I get where you're coming from with that.
It's a sad take because I hate admitting it, but it does feel like they're actually in like an era now.
Yeah.
Where it's like there was almost, you go back the last couple of years, it's like they had Judge and they had these guys, but it does now feel like Aaron Judge has emerged as like that, centerpiece of the team, the face of the franchise, which almost has felt like it's been lacking the
Mm-hmm.
last handful of years. Which it says a lot when you're the Yankees and you do have Aaron Judge for the last couple of years, and people are kind of on the fence, like, is this guy like actually like a Derek Jeter successor type of guy? Where it's like you define the era by the superstar, and you've got Aaron Judge now, where it's like he is fun to watch. Like I love watching Aaron Judge play. Giancarlo Stanton, like I love watching him play too, and Soto and all these guys. And then Twins fans know all about Luis Gil, who was traded for we
Yeah.
don't talk about that trade because especially after he smoked the Twins, so it's the Twins curse. But yeah, it feels like the Yankees are actually in an era, and it's like, okay, baseball is a little bit more interesting.
It helps too that Judge is healthy this year
Mm-hmm.
because he spent so much time away last season. I went to Yankee Stadium last season to kind of check that one off. And he wasn't even in the game, and it was against the Royals. And it was like Stanton was it. I don't even remember who was pitching. I just remember I wasn't excited about it. The best part was just, if you're watching on video, getting this sweet Nestor Cortez
Oh yeah.
bobblehead. That was their giveaway that day. But it was like such a bummer because you go into Yankee Stadium and again you're like, oh, this is the Yankees. This is going to be a fun game. And I'm just sitting there like, I could leave after the stretch and like be done for the day. This game is so boring. Because again, there was only Stanton and he wasn't even doing so hot that season. So it is fun when they're actually competitive and they're actually dominating in the league.
Yeah, it's easy to be romantic about baseball, to romanticize baseball, a sport that loves and lives in its past, perhaps no more than any other sport on earth. And the Yankees are a central piece of that history. So it's just kind of nice. And it helps too that it's not like they're a dynasty. I mean, they haven't won a World Series like in over a decade.
Yeah.
So, and Yankees fans, I think we're in the grace period of Yankees fans not being totally insufferable, of being like, we're a long suffering franchise, which is something no Yankees fan can ever say. But it's been a while, which I guess helps. But then again, at the flip side of that, you mentioned the Cowboys. I don't think anybody's sympathizing with the Cowboys not having won since the 90s. So
No.
maybe the Yankees are immune to some of that annoyance.
Cowboys hit their peak in the 90s. Now they're just as insufferable as everyone else. Oh. Then there was something about how they treat their cheerleaders like garbage. And I was like, man, this team just sucks.
Then again, you could be even more unlikable of a franchise.
Yeah. Then again, I'm a long-suffering Bears fan, so it really doesn't make a difference about football team. It's just sad no matter what.
It's a good thing you have the White Sox to fall back on. Oh, wait. Oh, no.
And the Bulls to fall back on. Oh, wait. No. I have the Chicago Sky to fall back on.
There we go.
That's my backup.
Angel Reese. They're fun.
Yes.
I love this guy.
So that's, it's bad when the same owner owns two of your favorite teams and does nothing for them. And then, trades like your golden boy for someone that goes to clubs with 17-year-olds with Josh Giddey. And now like DeMar wants out. I'm like, okay, well, this is going to be a really fun few seasons coming up. I'm just not even going to watch them play.
Yeah, the Josh Giddey is already. I'm out when they trade for Josh Giddey, and then it's like, but your future is what? Patrick Williams and Josh Giddey, and building around that. That's you're peaking at the 10th seed in the play-in game about every single year. That's, come on, you're the Chicago Bulls.
I know.
You're not a small market franchise.
I know.
Stop acting like it.
It's going to be so sad. And yeah, we were kind of making fun of this. My son was trying to give me the lowdown on Josh Giddey, and I was like, I don't really want to hear about this. All I needed to know was that DeMar DeRozan is in that Kendrick Lamar video now for Not Like Us, singing the part about a minor, and now he's got to deal with this guy on his team while he's still here. So that's all I really needed to know about the situation. I will only listen to what DeMar DeRozan has to say, and I will not be taking questions.
That's usually a good route to take.
Yeah. So, well, that's all I've got for you. Please remind everyone where we can find you.
Puckett's Pond, J. Dave Hill on Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it nowadays. But Twins Twitter lives forever. So it'll never be Twins X. It's always going to be Twins Twitter. So, and Crystal, you always have a place in Twins Twitter. We all love you in Twins Twitter. We all love White Sox fans. It's not I've always equated it to like a sibling rivalry where it's like we can go, Sox and Twins fans can go at each other, but as soon as like somebody from Cleveland or somewhere else tries to get involved, you get very protective. You're like, no, I can say these things, you can't say these things, type of thing. So
I get protective over my Twins mutuals for sure. They've been nothing but gems, and I love all of them. So yes, well, thank you so much for coming on again. We'll have to, do this again next year.
Thank you for having me. Always love coming on.
All right. Well, see you later.